The Grand Hall in Geneva was packed. Leaders from every corner of the world had gathered for the Global Security Unity Summit. Cameras buzzed. Journalists whispered predictions. But no one was prepared for what would unfold that day. As Captain Ibrahim Traoré entered, dressed not in a tailored suit but in his military uniform, a symbol of his fight against neo-colonialism, every head turned. Many stood in respect. Some remained seated, unsure how to receive this bold young African leader who had turned down Western aid and demanded sovereignty. Then came the moment. He approached a row of diplomats. The camera zoomed in. He extended his hand to greet Senator Charles Whitmore, a respected black U.S. senator who had marched for civil rights, written books on equality, and spoken often about the unity of the black diaspora. But instead of shaking Ibrahim's hand, Whitmore stepped back, visibly, deliberately, coldly. Gasps filled the room. Ibrahim's hand stayed in the air, just for a second too long. The silence was brutal. Cameras kept rolling. All eyes waited for Traoré's reaction. Would he storm off? Respond with fire? Instead, he smiled. A soft, knowing smile. And that's when the story truly began. While the world buzzed with headlines, Ibrahim remembered something. He was 12. His mother had walked barefoot to a local court in Burkina Faso. She carried papers, land ownership documents the family had kept for generations. But the French-trained official tore them in front of her. She didn't fight, she just looked down. Quiet tears, the kind that stay in your throat. Don't ever bow to silence, she had whispered to young Ibrahim that night. When someone tries to shame you, speak, gently, but truthfully. So here he was, years later, publicly rejected by a fellow black man from the West. And he understood. This wasn't just about him. This was about misunderstanding, mistrust, trauma passed down through systems meant to divide. Senator Whitmore didn't see him as a partner. He saw a threat, a rebel, a question mark. But instead of reacting, Traoré took the mic. The room was still. Even Whitmore looked uneasy now. I grew up watching your speeches, Senator Whitmore, he began gently. I admired your words about black unity, about pride, about justice. He paused. But what if justice sometimes wears a uniform instead of a suit? Gasps again. No anger, just pain, spoken plainly. And it broke the room open. Senator Whitmore didn't respond. His jaw tightened, but his eyes darted, suddenly unsure. Ibrahim continued. My people didn't choose war. We chose survival. When the world closed its ears, we raised our voices. When terror came to our doorsteps, we didn't beg for help. We stood up. He turned to the audience, calm, measured. And now, some call us rebels, militants, unfit for diplomacy. He looked back at Whitmore. But we are fathers, sons, brothers, like you, Senator. A woman in the crowd began to cry quietly. We don't ask for pity. We ask for partnership. And then, the twist no one saw coming. Ibrahim reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photo. It was faded, but visible. It showed a young Whitmore in Africa, 1987, smiling beside a Burkinabe village chief. You stood here once, Ibrahim said. You believed in us back then. Do you still? The senator's hand dropped to his side. He stared at the photo. His lips parted, but no words came. The hall had forgotten how to breathe. What Ibrahim did next would change everything. But that is in the next chapter. Just as the silence threatened to consume the hall, Ibrahim unfolded a worn piece of paper from the same pocket that held the photo. This letter, he said softly, was written by a Burkinabe boy in 1991. He had seen his father killed in front of him by mercenaries. That boy thought the world had abandoned him. He looked directly at Senator Whitmore. That boy wrote to an American leader, someone he believed would understand pain and justice. someone he admired. A pause. "That letter was addressed to you, Senator." Gasps again. Whitmore blinked. His lips trembled now. He whispered something to himself that no one could hear. "My mother helped me write it," Ibrahim continued. "She said, 'One day someone out there will listen to us, not because we scream, but because our truth is too heavy to ignore.'" A single tear slid down Traoré's face, but his voice remained calm. She never got a reply. The audience had gone still, motionless, as if frozen in time. The senator looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He didn't remember the letter, but the boy who wrote it never forgot. Whitmore's mouth opened, then closed. His hands clenched together. "I get thousands of letters a year," he finally muttered. Ibrahim nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "You never knew my name." The senator looked at the letter again. His own youthful handwriting. On the back, a faded note. "Too emotional, discard." It was the one letter he'd personally chosen not to answer. He closed his eyes. "It's easier to forget a name when the face is far away," Ibrahim said gently. "But the people we don't acknowledge, they still live, still wait, still hope." The silence in the hall shifted, from tension to sorrow. One delegate, an elderly woman from South Africa, stood slowly. "I remember that village," she said. "I was there in 91. I saw what happened." She looked at Ibrahim. "I had no idea that boy was you." A few more rose to their feet, one by one, quietly, respectfully, not out of protocol, but pain. Senator Whitmore sat down, suddenly weak. "I failed you," he whispered. "I failed all of you." Ibrahim walked forward. Still no handshake. Still no anger. Just a soft voice. "It's never too late to stand up." News networks around the world were broadcasting the moment live. But what they didn't show was what happened after. When the speeches ended and the cameras turned away, Ibrahim Traoré walked off stage into a private corridor. Senator Whitmore followed. "I didn't mean to disrespect you," he said. "I was afraid, not of you, but of what you represent, of what it says about everything I thought I knew." Ibrahim paused. He looked tired now, not angry, just human. "You weren't afraid of me," he said. "You were afraid of what it means to see someone rise outside the system you trusted." Whitmore nodded, eyes misty. "You remind me of someone I used to be." He held out his hand. But this time, Ibrahim didn't take it. He placed something in it instead. It was a folded piece of fabric. His mother's scarf. The one she wore the day she stood in court, humiliated and voiceless. She used to say, "Let the ones who forget remember," with something they can't throw away. The senator stared at the scarf and cried, alone, in silence. Outside, the press was still asking if there had been a handshake. The next morning, the summit continued. Speeches, policies, applause.
Couldn't touch.
But something had changed. People weren't talking about defense budgets or trade routes anymore. They were whispering about the moment a hand was refused, and a heart still responded with grace. When it was Ibrahim Traoré's turn to speak on stage again, organizers expected a typical statement on African sovereignty. But Ibrahim did something no one expected. He stepped aside from the podium and invited a girl just 14 years old to speak instead. The crowd was stunned. "This is Mariam," he said. "She lost her family to terrorism near Kaya, Burkina Faso. She walked 4 days to reach one of our safe zones, and yet she still sings every morning." Mariam stood there, trembling, holding a piece of paper. "I don't know big words," she began, "but I want people to stop looking away from us." Her voice cracked. "I just want someone to care." That was it. No politics, no data, just raw, painful truth. And the silence after her words, louder than any speech that day. For the first time, even Senator Whitmore stood and clapped, not because he was expected to, but because he had to. Later that day, in a private panel for global conflict recovery, Ibrahim was asked to share his personal journey. He hesitated. Then slowly, he unbuttoned the collar of his uniform. Just beneath it, a deep scar, jagged and rough, stretching across his shoulder. "This scar was not from war," he said. "It's from silence." Everyone leaned in. "When I was 17, my village was attacked. We asked for help. No one came. I ran into the fire to pull my baby cousin from a burning hut." A long pause. When the flames licked my shoulder, I thought, at least someone will remember me this way, with a scar. He looked around the room. "But you know what I've learned? It's not the wound that defines us. It's who we become after it heals." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even hardened diplomats were shifting in their seats. And then, just as he sat down, Ibrahim whispered, "I wear this medal because I survived, but I wear this scar because I stayed." The room didn't applaud. They just sat with it, because some truths don't need applause. They need silence. That night, Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his hotel room. He looked out the window, watching the snow fall, so different from the dry winds of Ouagadougou. He didn't know the cameras were still rolling. A documentary crew had been granted access to his private quarters as part of the summit coverage. But what they captured next wasn't staged. Ibrahim opened his laptop. There were hundreds of messages, from Americans, Europeans, Africans, from poor kids, from teachers, from soldiers, from mothers. One stood out. It was from a 10-year-old boy in Detroit named Malik. The message was simple. "Dear Mr. Traoré, my dad said he didn't like you at first, but he watched you today, and he cried. He told me, that man is what a leader looks like. I want to be like you. I want to make people cry. In a good way. Thank you, Malik." Ibrahim smiled. He leaned back, placed a hand over his heart, and whispered to the screen, "Make them cry for the right reasons, Malik." Then he wiped a tear from his own eye, because now even the children were watching. As the summit drew to a close, a photo quietly began circulating online. It wasn't part of the official press kit. It wasn't shared by diplomats or news outlets. A young intern from the media team had snapped it, accidentally. It showed Ibrahim Traoré sitting on the edge of a chair, leaning forward, talking softly to an elderly janitor holding a mop. The janitor looked shocked, honored, and Ibrahim? He was listening, not talking, just listening. No bodyguards, no cameras, no stage. Just two men, one cleaning, one leading, sharing a moment of respect. The photo spread like wildfire. "This is leadership," one tweet read. Another, "He spoke to the janitor with more humility than most speak to presidents." By nightfall, it had been shared by celebrities, activists, even soldiers. Senator Whitmore, sitting in his hotel room with that scarf still in his lap, saw the image and began to cry again, because that photo said what no speech ever could. And Whitmore knew. He hadn't just refused a handshake. He had rejected the very spirit of humility he once stood for. The final day of the summit was different. The air was heavier, more reverent. As Ibrahim stepped onto the stage one last time, the applause came late, and not everyone stood. But he didn't seem to notice. He walked slowly to the podium, placed both hands on either side, and looked directly at the audience. Then he stepped back. "I won't give a speech today," he said quietly, "because I've already said what I needed to say." He paused. "But before I leave, I want to ask just one question." He turned to the crowd. "When the applause ends, who are you still willing to stand for?" No one moved. No one spoke. A few heads dropped. Others stared at the floor. And in that silence, a man began clapping. Slowly, brokenly, but with intent. It was Senator Whitmore. Everyone turned. He walked to the stage, no security, no hesitation. And he did something that made the entire room rise in shock. He knelt, right in front of Ibrahim. The room erupted in gasps, but Ibrahim gently pulled him up and whispered, "We don't kneel, we rise, together." For a heartbeat, the entire room froze. What had just happened? A sitting U.S. senator, a man with decades of power and pride, had knelt before a revolutionary African leader, not in submission, but in remorse, in recognition. And Ibrahim Traoré? He didn't gloat. He didn't make a show of it. He helped him up, dignified, gentle, like a brother lifting another from the ground. And then he stepped back. He turned to the crowd. "If we must kneel," he said softly, "let it be to those who lost their voices while we argued policies. Let it be to the children we failed to protect, to the mothers we left waiting." His voice broke, just slightly, a moment of rawness the world had never seen in him. And slowly, almost shyly, others began to stand. One delegate from Canada, then one from Nigeria, then France, then Germany, then Brazil. A standing ovation, not for power, but for truth, the truth of scars, of silence, of second chances. Outside it began to rain, a quiet, cleansing rain, and inside, even the walls seemed to breathe, because finally, they were all standing. That evening, after the summit's final ceremony, Ibrahim returned to his room. The scarf Senator Whitmore had been given? It wasn't his mother's. His mother had died before she could ever give it to him. He took out a sealed envelope, aged and yellowed, with handwriting barely legible from time. It was addressed to U.S. Senator Whitmore, Washington, D.C., 1991. Ibrahim never mailed it. He had written it the day after his mother died in his arms, bleeding, whispering the words, "Tell them. Never stop telling them." But the world felt too far, too uncaring, too loud to hear one boy's pain. So he kept the letter. For years, folded, unread, unsent. He opened it now. His 12-year-old handwriting shook with anger, confusion, and something purer, hope. "Dear Senator, I don't know where America is, but they say you have power. Please don't forget us. Please send someone. My mother says you're a good man. If you can't help us, can you at least tell the world we existed?" Ibrahim. He stared at it, then whispered, "I never stopped telling them, Mama," and placed the letter in a small fire. The ink burned slowly. But the truth? It rose like smoke. Just past midnight, Ibrahim heard a knock. He opened the door and froze. It wasn't security. It wasn't media. It was a retired U.S. soldier, standing there with trembling hands and wet eyes. "I wasn't supposed to be here," the man said, "but I had to come." Ibrahim nodded. "Do I know you?" The man pulled something from his coat, a photograph of Ibrahim as a child, hiding behind rubble, blood on his face, eyes wide with terror. "I took this," the man said. "I was part of an off-the-record mission. We were told not to engage, just observe. No one was supposed to know." He paused. "But I saw you. I wanted to help. They told me to stand down. I've lived with that picture in my wallet for 34 years. Tears fell down his cheeks. "I don't want to be a ghost anymore." Ibrahim stepped forward, heart thudding, and hugged the man, tightly, like a son who found something he never knew he'd lost. "You came back," Ibrahim whispered. "No," the soldier replied, sobbing. "You did." Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, a silent healing began. The soldier's photo made headlines the next morning. It showed the world what no words could. A young Ibrahim Traoré, frightened and alone, in the heart of a crisis the West had ignored. And beneath the photo, the retired soldier had written only one sentence: "We saw him, and we walked away." The image spread like wildfire across social media, news outlets, schools, military bases, and suddenly people began remembering. Doctors who once served in NGOs, soldiers who passed through Africa's silent conflicts, diplomats who read the reports but never asked more. It became a global reckoning. In Burkina Faso, thousands gathered outside the capital, holding up images of Ibrahim as a child, saying, "He survived for us." Even Senator Whitmore held a press conference. His voice cracked, his hands shook. "We failed that boy. I failed that boy. But I will not fail the man he became." He paused, looked into the cameras, and neither should you. A global campaign launched overnight. Stand with Traoré. But for Ibrahim, none of that mattered. Because the only voice he still wanted to hear, his mother's. And in the quiet, when the world went still, he swore he could hear her whisper, "You told them, my son. You told them all." 1 week after the summit, Ibrahim Traoré returned to Burkina Faso. He was met by thousands at the airport, but his eyes searched for someone else. Not for a general, not a diplomat, but for Mariam, the young girl who had spoken at the summit. He found her at the back of the crowd, holding a handmade sign. "You made them listen, Papa Ibrahim." He walked toward her, tears building, knelt, and held out a small wooden carving. It was a bird, its wings open, carved from the wood of the tree his mother used to sit beneath. "When you feel afraid," he told her, "hold this. It remembers where you come from." Then she asked softly, "Are they still listening?" He looked around, at the cameras, the reporters, the diplomats now paying attention to Africa for the first time in years. And he smiled. Yes, and this time they won't forget. But in that sea of people, a figure stepped forward. Senator Whitmore, not with speeches, but with a school backpack, filled with books, tablets, and supplies. "I brought something," he said, voice shaking. "For her, and for the ones we failed." Mariam hugged him. And in that moment, two worlds healed. Weeks later, Ibrahim was invited to give a televised address. It wasn't political. It wasn't scripted. Just a message. From one human heart to the world. He stood before the camera, simple jacket, no military medals, no fanfare. "I've seen war," he began. "I've seen children lose their mothers and mothers bury their sons. I've seen power misused and silence weaponized." He held up the photo, the one of him as a boy. This was me, forgotten by the world. Then he held up Mariam's photo, her smiling, holding a pencil and laughing. "This is the future, if we dare to choose it." He stepped forward. "You may not be a senator or a president, but you can choose not to look away. You can choose to listen, to care, to speak when it's easier to stay silent." His voice cracked. "If you're hearing this, I ask one thing. Don't wait until a child becomes a soldier, before you believe their life matters." He stepped away from the camera, and for a full 10 seconds, he let the silence speak louder than anything else. No applause, no anthem, just a man, a message, and a memory that won't be forgotten. On the day the first Mariam Education Center opened in Burkina Faso, funded by donations from around the world, something strange happened. The skies, long dry from drought, finally opened. Rain poured down in sheets as hundreds of children rushed under the roof, laughing, dancing, holding notebooks above their heads. Ibrahim stood at the gate, soaking wet, smiling like a child himself. Next to him, Senator Whitmore, drenched, smiling too. "This is what hope looks like," Whitmore whispered. Ibrahim nodded, "No," he said. "This is what healing looks like." Inside the school, a plaque was placed on the wall. It read, "To the children who were never heard, to the ones still waiting to be seen, we see you now." And as the camera zoomed out, over the school, over the soaked children, over the land that had known so much pain, the world felt different. Not perfect, but finally listening. Now, it's your turn. If this story moved you, if you felt even a single tear, hit that like button. Comment with one word that this story made you feel. And subscribe, not just for more stories, but because your voice matters. Let's flood the world with empathy. Let's make silence impossible. Let's make sure no child is ever invisible again. Thank you for watching.